Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our backcountry skiing webinar. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy pre-holiday season to be with us tonight, digitally. I'm Mary Brown, the guide manager at Alpine Ascents and our default webinar MC. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce tonight's incredible hosts. First, we have Lyra Pierotti, an IFMGA-certified guide, which is basically the PhD of guiding, whose passion for skiing and climbing has taken her all over Washington, the French Alps, Alaska, Antarctica, South America, Russia, and her favorite, the Dolomites. A senior guide at Alpine Ascents since 2014, Lyra also runs our internal guide trainings, leads trips all over Washington and soon the Alps, operates her own personal training business, Movementum, and serves as an Aries Pro instructor, working to train the next generation of avalanche professionals. We're also joined by Josh Hirshberg, an avalanche specialist with NWAC, the Northwest Avalanche Center, since 2018. Josh has nearly 2 decades of avalanche forecasting experience, holds a level 3 avalanche certification, is an AMGA certified ski guide. He is a master of turning complex snow and weather data into actionable advice for backcountry travelers. Before we dive into the webinar, a couple notes. Please put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll answer them throughout the webinar and also at the end. This webinar is being recorded, so you can always watch the replay on our blog later. While Lyra is getting set up, we have a little bit of homework. I'm going to launch a webinar poll, which you can hopefully please fill out. It's super fast. It'll ask you for like your name, not your name, where you ski tour, background, that kind of stuff. And once you finish up with the homework, if you drop your name in the chat and where you're tuning in from. And that is all from me. Lyra, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Mary. All right, I'm going to get things queued here and I'll watch the poll. I can see the results trickling in. Thanks for filling that out, y'all. Hopefully that's accessible to everybody, depending on your device. That is just going to help give Josh and I a bit of a perspective on who we are talking to. And those of you who are showing up in-person video on the webinar will certainly have priority. So that is great. All right, let's get things queued up here. Okay, does everybody see my screen? Thanks, Josh. You're actually the only response I can see. Okay, great. All right, and we're almost there with the webinar poll. I'll give y'all a few more seconds. Hold on. Okay, how about now? Josh, do you still see my screen? My notes are not in the way. Okay, great. Oh my God, there's so many. What would I do in the world without 2 screens anymore in my life? Okay. Waiting on a couple more for the polling result, and then I'll end that. Thanks, y'all. I should have queued up the Jeopardy music.
Nice to see some familiar names in the list there.
Yeah. Oh, and those of you who are just coming in, looks like we've got a few more people. I'll let the poll go for just a moment longer. I'll end it in just a moment. But I'll start talking. So we are here. I'm Lyra. This is Josh. We're going to talk at you about the next level in your backcountry skiing or riding in the path to proficiency. The goal of this webinar is to basically just try to find where all of you are at, give you some tools and some ideas on how to assess where you're at and what next steps you need. And certainly we're not going to fill all of those gaps in 90 minutes, but we will certainly try to point you in some directions and help you identify some of your best moves to achieve that next level that you're desiring in your winter backcountry travel this year. Okay, it looks like we've got everyone on. No, I'll let that keep rolling. I'll let the poll keep going. We'll get to that in a moment here. All right. So tonight we've got essentially 3 buckets that we're going to dive into. I've got a pile of gear behind me that I'm going to talk about. And then we're going to dive into tour planning. And that tour planning, I will start us off with some mapping. That's a huge passion of mine. I've always really liked Map and Compass. And now, like, there are some really amazing tools out there. So I'm going to show you a couple different apps that you can start using and how to get to your next level in navigation. And then we're going to go and chat with Josh about the conditions in terms of avalanche forecast, weather, and using obviously that forecast to avoid the hazard. And also like considering, wait, how do I also find where the good snow is, because those tools are the same. So lots of layers, and remembering that this is about going out, coming back safely, but also having fun. So we'll dive into that. And then we'll give you a quick list of your next steps, and that will hopefully carry you forward. Okay. Gear. Ready. So this is just a massive outline of, I think, all the things. I might be missing some stuff, but this should be most of the stuff that you need for your average backcountry day, plus or minus a collection of things depending on your goals for the day, or if you have like a multi-day tour or something like that. Sorry, I have to move my screens around so I can see my notes. Okay, so let's start with skis. Behind me here, move my screen a little bit. I have awkwardly 2 different pairs of skis, so I can show you a couple different things. All right, so with our skis, one of the things I think a lot about is tuning, and how I don't do a lot of it, being a Washingtonian. In Washington, we ski a lot of, and Josh is laughing, we ski a lot of soft snow, and we get away with a lot of sloppy ski care. So whatever, roll with that. But what am I talking about? One of the things, so I do try to be good about my ski tuning. By the time I get to the spring, we're going from soft snow where like your edge control is, we're wearing like, or we have like 110 millimeter underfoot skis, and our edge to edge transfer is not usually the main focus point of skiing when you're skiing like several feet of powder and it's like kind of heavier. So whatever. But then we get to our volcano season. And so for all of you, I would recommend starting to get a grasp on your ski tuning needs. And when you get onto more firm snow where things are consequential, we have a lot of big volcanoes and consequential terrain. Your ski tuning is important. So that means sharp edges. There is some detail around the angles at which those edges are tuned. And all of that is referenced to your base being flat. So what does that mean? Let me show you here. A quick check that I like to do here is to take my ski, and then something, you can get like special tools for it, but I'll just make sure that over time, what happens is the bases can get round with your use. So like round like this. So what I will do is grab, literally just have this like box of air tags. And I'll put that flat across it and then shine a light behind it. And what I'm looking for is any like variation in the gaps. You can't really quite see it there, but what I look for is a big variation in the light, and it will show me if there's like a significant bow to the base of my skis. So I recommend getting a sense for that. And that's not like a stop and fix necessarily right now at this point in the season, like I said, because we ski a lot of soft snow and you're basically just putting like floaty things on your feet. A good friend of mine and colleague likes to say, like, I could ski 2x4s in the Northwest and have a good time. That might be a slight exaggeration, but point is, we have a lot of soft snow. You can float on it with wide enough skis, but in the springtime, take a look at those bases, make sure that they are flat, and then make sure that your edges are sharp. The way that you sharpen edges does reference a flat base. And so if you're sharpening your edges, but your base is not flat, you're going to get a weird angle on your edges. So good key next level beta there. Okay, let me put that away. For boots, the only real note that I have for you is it is like, you'll see I have mine actually buckled. I'm not wearing them. It is good to store them between outings, nicely buckled. It helps to maintain the plastic shape. So that's just probably basic. Most of you probably know that. And a note that I have for you there is that boot fitting is worth the investment. If you try to imagine that you're just going to put your foot into a tube of plastic and it's going to fit your foot perfectly, that is just kind of outrageous. So boot fitting's great. There's a lot you can do probably yourself. And then going and seeing a professional and finding a really good one. It's not easy, but it is an art form and it's super cool. And hopefully then you can keep those boots around for several seasons with good care. So, okay. We're not going to take much of a dive into bindings. There's lots around. There's tons of different types. You'll see the ones that I have here. I tend to prefer fully metal, but anymore I do have a pair of carbon fiber. Carbon fiber proves to be pretty darn durable. So lots of options in that category. What I will say for a lot of, if your boot size is smaller, so I have tended towards a few types of bindings where there's a ramp angle that is really minimal. The ramp angle is the change from the height where your heel sits down to your toe. If you have really small boot sizes, with the way that these are designed, they are designed with some ramp angles so that you get adequate forward pressure. So it's slightly different from a downhill binding in design. When you have really small boots, that ramp angle can become quite severe. So I have found online, you can find sources that will tell you that ramp angle. I've found ones that give me a relatively flat stance on the ski. That is my preference. Different people have different preference. So some notes there. Happy to, in the Q&A at the end, we can chat more about that. That can get a little bit in the weeds, but good to know about. Okay, going rapid fire here, continuing on. Poles, where are they? My poles here. All right, I have two different examples. I have a 2-segment and a 3-segment pole. The main thing that I think about with poles is the bottom segment and the swing weight. So this is a 2-segment pole. I tend to prefer that one because I find it's easier to flick with my wrist. But this is a decent one. Pros and cons here with a 2-segment pole is when you collapse it, it is not as short as a 3-segment pole. So it only goes, so if you're putting these like split borders, you probably are going to want a 3-segment pole because you're not swinging it around on the descent, and it's much easier to put on your pack. So dramatic difference there when you're trying to stow it. You're going to end up with a big flag on the top of your pack. So that's a little pro tip with the poles. Your skins, I have, this is my newest skin setup. I picked this up last year, and the size that I was able to get from Black Diamond required me to do a little more cutting of the skins than I'd had to do in previous years. And when I did cut it, I looked at it and I was so annoyed. Like, look at all of that base that's exposed. And so I was like, oh no, this is gonna be terrible. With skins, you want the base to be covered so that you don't step on it and slide. Like, that's kind of obvious, right? You trim it so that your edges are exposed, but not too much of that sliding base area. The edges will give you contact and grip on steep slopes, even when skinning. So you don't want those covered up. But here's what I found out. When I put these skis on the slope, on the snow, all of the area of the ski that actually contacted the snow was covered in skin. So I realized that this was actually a slightly lighter weight solution. I don't actually need skin covered here because it doesn't touch the snow when I'm skinning. So when I'm skinning, I'm pressing, standing on the middle here, and all of the ski here is in contact with the snow. And this was just a little bit of tail rocker that rides off of the snow, and it wasn't relevant for when I was going uphill. So that was a good little lesson for me. And yeah, and there's, it is a little limited, the sizes of skins that you can purchase out there. And then you can go fully custom, and you can get just like a full length and be as custom as you like, to your preference, of course, depending on your tolerance for tinkering. All right, more on gear. Your transceiver is probably one of the next most important things. This is what's going to allow you to find your partners if buried in an avalanche, and what's going to allow them to find you. Ironically, don't let these get exposed to cold temperatures. And when you are in the cold, it should be on your body. And when you're not, or when it's not on your body, that means it should be in your house with you. Don't leave it in your car. Don't let it freeze overnight. If you're camping, keep it in your sleeping bag with you. Between seasons, take out the batteries. These do need to be less than 5 years old, is usually about the industry standard. At a minimum, make sure that your firmware, that's the software that's inside of the thing, make sure that's updated every season, or check that it's the most current. And some things that are coming up with these, there are pants and other clothing that are providing specialized pockets. Be cautious with those. Read your manufacturer's recommendations for how to carry these. I personally just go with the manufacturer's recommendations, and typically that is the harness that it comes with. So that is to some extent up to y'all, and just be sure that your carry method keeps it on you in the violence of an avalanche. Public service announcement. Wearables are increasingly popular, let's put it this way. And that means heart rate monitors, watches, got a variety of things right now here. These all transmit a Bluetooth signal, especially a chest strap. If you're wearing that, that's right next to where I wear my transceiver. Bluetooth is one of the most detrimental signals, or most competitive signals, I guess you would say, with a transceiver. It's really, really bad for that radio signal. Smartwatches, make sure that the smartwatch is not talking to your phone while you're out there, even if you could probably use it to navigate, but really minimize the impact of the radio signals. Be cognizant of the separation guidelines for electronics as well. Okay, now let's get into the pack. Let's see. Front of my pack here, I have my rescue pocket here. You'll see probe and shovel. Probes in the Northwest, it is nice to have a really long one. I do carry a shorter one in the springtime, sometimes around 240. It's carbon fiber, super lightweight when we're really like, it's climbing season and people are out in the mountains not using any of the rescue equipment. So you're like, this is kind of funny. You still want to follow best practices and be ready for realistically, climbers should also be carrying avalanche equipment more of the year. It's a goofy thing, separate webinar potentially. But in the winter, around 300 centimeters, one of the things to consider with your probe is it's a really useful way to springtime assess for crevasses in the Northwest in particular. So having a little more reach in front to check and see if I am in the clear or if I have a crack in front of me. But also just snow depth. That's one of the most interesting things for us to log throughout the season. So if you're out there taking notes on your tour day, it's a great thing to share with NWAC in the public observations. Snow depth is super helpful for so many things. It can tell you where there may be avalanche debris that's accumulating over a season. Lots of cool things. With that, make sure that you select one that has a deployment mechanism that you like. I really like, with Alpine Ascents, we get guide issued Ortovox, and I'm totally a fan. They didn't pay me to say that, but I've really liked their mechanism. BCA has a really nice and smooth mechanism as well. And then make sure the segment size works for your pack. Sometimes those segment sizes can be different. BCA was a little too long for some of my smaller packs. It was annoying. So check those out. Your shovels need to be metal. They are best good to have extendable blades.
Okay.
This one has hoe mode, so that's kind of cool. Can give you an option of shoveling in a variety of directions. But being able to extend is great. That gives you a little more leverage. And I would not recommend a larger blade. A larger blade is not going to move more snow faster. It's going to be heavier and slow you down. So small blade, short moves, short, fast moves. Those will actually get you far. Okay. Now, last thing in this pile before I go into the pack with the rescue kit is this radio. You'll see for my winter kit, I do carry this microphone so that the main part of this other massive electronic I can stow in my pack, and I can have this over on my shoulder, not interfering with my transceiver. Lots to think about with modern electronics. And you can ask anybody that I work with, I despise radios with a passion. Cannot stand them. They make me crazy. And I strongly advocate using them in skiing because they're great. It's just a really excellent communication tool, especially when you need to separate, for example, for safety. So use good planning, use good communication that maybe you don't absolutely need it. Have a good plan when you embark on your descent, but having this thing so that you can pivot if you notice something during the descent is absolutely one of the most helpful ways to improve your communication tactics in skiing. Okay. Here we go. So getting back to the gear check list here, we have transport, rescue. Communication can include radios, inReach. I have that here. That's this little device here, a satellite texting thing. Some iPhones now have satellite access, which is awesome. And then when we get to your emergency equipment in your group, it is wise to have a collection of, or a full set of, you don't have to have like redundant first aid kits necessarily, maybe a couple. One person should definitely have a repair kit, and then having a sled or bivvy. So something you can put somebody, something you can use as a shelter potentially with snow, digging in the snow using your shovel, as well as potentially a way to wrap someone up and drag them out of the backcountry if you need to. That is something, this is a 2-person bivvy, kind of large. There are 1-person bivvies that are roughly half that size. And then there are specifically made sleds. Your average mountain guide that works in the ski season is going to have a specialized sled that looks a lot like that, actually. Okay, let's take a bit of a dive, however, into this. Go ahead and end the poll here. Okay, now we got that. Let's go ahead and take a bit of a dive into the repair kit. And the main thing I'll say, you'll get a link, I think Mary's on it. You'll get a link for Traverse equipment out of Bellingham. There's a great, I think I can actually toggle you too. You may not see it. There's a great company that makes repair kits specifically for backcountry skiing. Great place to start. It has basically all the things that you need. I've assembled one of my own, and I'll show you what we have in there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my share for a moment so you can see just me. And that should increase the screen size here. Okay. So the things I carry in here, I do throw in an emergency headlamp. So that's nice and protected so it doesn't get turned on during the season. Most of the season it's just sitting in my pack. So this is a really cool, this is a type of wax that I can use for my skins or for my bases. It is from Nordic skiing, and it has this little cork buff. There's a lot of different things. There's also like a paste wax, also from Nordic skiing. And then there's other liquid waxes, but having something that can help you out of a pinch if you realize like the snow temperature changed dramatically and you are not sliding, or you forgot to wax, or you got like a little extra glue. This can be a great way to restore the slidiness of your skis and get yourself back. And then this one I've liked a lot. So it's just a rub on wax and then you buff it out with that. Something like that. Lighter, always good to have. Here I have just a few batteries. That's going to be for transceivers. Another strategy there is combine these two things. Take a normal headlamp, not a emergency tiny one, and have fresh batteries in it. And then you have fresh batteries you can steal from your headlamp or your transceiver if you needed to. These things, these are awesome. This size, this one can be used to splint poles. And then this one, actually, I should have put my other one in there. I've used one of these on a ski. It can go over the entire ski and boot if you blow a binding, and then you wrench it down, and then it just takes the form of it. You can slide over it because it's metal. So that goes under the base of your ski. Of course, that is not a DIN rated binding fix, obviously, but it'll get you out. Binding tool, this one is ratcheting, which is really handy if you do actually have to do any work on a binding in the field. What I don't have with me right now is I'll carry putty and steel wool on overnight or like longer trips, so that if a binding rips out, you can have some success in packing it back in and screwing the things back in there. This comes with a variety of drill bits there. So little ratcheting tool. This is also from our friends at Traverse. Tiny multi-tool. The critical thing here to have is a little pliers. So that's a pliers, not a scissors. That will help you if you need to do any repairs, for example, with baling wire. Also great to have. Cordage. Seems like that always comes in some sort of in handy to some extent. Oh, this is interesting. Here's a little more wax. This is glop stopper or skin wax. It's purple. It comes in a rectangle. That is to help your skins glide better. Relevant skin fixing tools. So I've got an extra tail clip and front clip. So whatever you need, all of this should be tailored specifically to the tools and things that you, or the equipment that you are using. Duct tape, not great sometimes in the cold, but I carried it anyway. Lots of ski straps. I got like 4 in here, and then I'll have 2 more on my poles. They're out of control. 6 minimum required. What else is in here? Classic. You know what that's for. These are other little tools and a little extender for the ratcheting tool here. So that's helpful. And then, I think we got through it all. A scraper, you could have a bigger scraper. This is a tiny volet scraper. I love it. It has a tapered edge here and then a pokey edge there, especially for Northwest. Having this poker is really helpful for some bindings. This is for split boards because often you have more fiddly bits that you have to shift and move. So recommended that there. That's from Volet. And then this last thing I have is really good to have and a really weird thing. It's like a 4 millimeter chunk of plastic specific to my binding. This ensures that if this has happened to me in the field, but I've had to readjust the spacing behind my heel to get things just right for the fit of my binding. Also allows me to adjust my binding if I need to put somebody else in my skis for some weird reason, which could happen. So I do keep this binding measurement plastic. I keep a couple of them around. I keep one at home and I keep one in my repair kit. Okay. Let me share my screen again. Oops, no, I did that thing again. Hold on. my notes.
Oh, we have a good question while you're transitioning
Yes, thank you.
from Cheryl. If there's a list of repair items that folks could have.
That is we can make you one, but I would say really just going with what you need for your bindings and making sure that you can think through all the things that you think will happen, can happen, and have something to address it. What I will show you here, that's a great example, is the Traverse. It's pretty extensive. It's a great way to start. Let me share my screen again. Okay, there. That is a great one. You'll find this online. That's just the image of their ski repair kit. Here we got it. So you'll see much of what I just presented to you, but I would say don't fear being really personalized on that. Make sure it's things that match what you can do and the things you're concerned about happening. And then this little guideline of this kit here will give you a good start. So poles breaking, bindings breaking, skis glopping, skins glopping. Those are the big ones. Importantly, remember that your first aid kit's going to have a few things as well. My first aid kit, for example, always has an emergency blanket, just a tiny little bivvy that's like one-time use. It has safety pins. So you'll see here, I've got the safety pins in my first aid kit. So I've kind of checked that box elsewhere. They put this handy little ski crystal card. I do keep one of those as well. And this goes in, I carry a tiny booklet for notes about the hazard and any notes that if I just can't seem to write notes on my phone, I have something here that's pencil and paper, and that lives inside of it. My little micro card. So really similar things here. Okay, I think I got through it all. What else did I miss, Josh?
That's pretty thorough. I think that's at least as much as I have in my repair kit.
Similar? Cool. Yeah. So no rote list for you. Start with this and really just, like tailor it to your needs and your bindings, importantly. That's going to be the big one. So this will look a little different for split board versus skis versus snowshoes, any number of things.
Oh, I was just thinking, I was seeing the Traverse kit. They have the some steel wire, or sometimes people call it baling wire.
Yeah.
That stuff is really handy. You can fix a lot of things with that.
Really handy. Yeah, and I think mine is a little bit thicker than the ones they have. It's just this like blob. And I think a little thinner is fine because you can just do a bunch of winds around things. It's one of those that I feel like over time I've evolved in what I've carried too, where like, oh, well, few hard lessons learned about specific gear or tendencies of our snowpack and the gear that I've chosen to use, things like that. So crowdsourcing with your friends and mishaps and learned lessons is always helpful as well. Cool. Okay. Well, if we're ready, I'm going to take a hard pivot to, oops, move my screen. I'm going to shift to tour planning.
I'll address one of those questions while you're switching gears there. Marshall asks, minimum investment to get started. I guess on the repair kit, there's not that much that's all that pricey in there. Maybe you can clarify if you had a specific question there. A backcountry ski kit, on the other hand, that's kind of a lot of cash to drop.
No kidding. Yeah, here's the price on this one here on the Traverse kit is $90. And I will say it's pretty svelte. It's pretty tiny. Mine is like kind of big. So, well, it's not super cheap, but it is super handy. Cool. Okay. Right on. Now, some tour planning basics. This year I am starting to, I teach level 1, level 2 rescue programs, as well as instructor training and pro training programs for ARI directly. This year, I'm going to start teaching using Onyx. Onyx has been rapidly evolving. What I like about Onyx, and this is Onyx Backcountry, y'all still see my screen, right? With the map on it. Great. Onyx here, what they've done is not crowdsourced. If y'all ever used FatMap, I love FatMap, but it was really just crowdsourced information. And so certain standard routes could just be like whatever one person did. And you're like, oh, that's not actually the best way. It's just the way they happen to go. Onyx uses beacon guidebooks for very decently well standardized names and locations for certain descents. So you're going to get pretty high quality information and the benefits of a little blue dot that puts you on the map. You're not going to see the blue dot here because I'm not there. But this is an app on your phone as well as on your desktop. Typically recommend doing a tour plan on your desktop because you have much more control over the features, bigger screen, but then that will appear if you're logged in with the same name, that will appear on your app as well on your phone. So you can do all the work here with more controls. So here we are at Stevens is where I'm going to start us. And the first thing I want to, let's do a quick orientation. This Discover tab here, it gives you a list of, here we are. This is from, there's Crystal Mountain Snoqualmie. This is populated, oops. I figured out that I am here to ski tour. So you've got lots of options here. So we're ski touring, Crystal Mountain, Washington East Side. And that's from the Beacon Guidebooks called Washington's East Side. Then zoom back in. You see lots of things here. These are all discrete areas. I'm going to start right here at the pass. Another thing to know about is this little thing. That is a SNOTEL site, aka a site that tells you about it has weather observations for you. They are going to give you whatever you're looking for here. Not all the sites collect all the same data. Depending on their position in the terrain, it will be different things. And here you've got snow depth, temperature. It says snow water equivalent, so it's the amount of water in the snow. And then let's see. There should be more. Well, we'll show you, it looks like not all of them are populated here. So Josh will dive into the NWAC's resources for these as well. So it's a cool thing. Then you get the location of that snow site, that SNOTEL site. Not 100% complete as of yet. As I said, Onyx is still developing. Okay, then the other nice thing in popular areas, which is a great place to start, a place where you have data, you have standardized information. It's a great place to start off your backcountry ski career. If you have these, you can click on them and oops, here's your skyline approach. And it's going to tell you how long it is. So the length of that's highlighted. So that's 1.1 miles. You climb a little over 1,000 feet and tells you the minimum and the maximum elevation. So you get a lot of data here. And then you can even scroll along here. This gives you the steepness as you go up. This terrain detail here gives you a classification that comes to us from Canada. It's very useful and something worth getting used to in terms of the language. And it classifies terrain based on how many potential overlapping avalanche paths you might be crossing in your route. So this calls it challenging. and says that your exposure to well-defined avalanche paths, start zones, terrain traps, overhead hazard is at a level 2. But there are options to reduce and eliminate your exposure with careful route finding. Okay. There's your SNOTEL site again. See it just highlighted there. Great. Okay. Now, let's say we've got that information. There's one gap here, and I'm going to show you another tool, another mapping tool that will give you a little more power. I like this one a lot. I do use it, and I personally still use CalTopo, which we'll go into next. What you don't have access to here is a time planning resource. So we'll go into that next. But let's just say, let's play with this a little bit, and let's say, okay, well, we got to Skyline Lake, but now I want to get over to, let's say, Happy Face. How am I going to do that? Build route tool on the right here. I'm going to pick up from Skyline Lake. Point draw. You'll see there's a snap to option here or a point draw. I'll show you what difference that makes. This snap to will keep you on any designated trails. Let's go back. If I put on point draw, it's just going to go where I click. In the snowy backcountry, often we're not necessarily following those standard trails. Unless you're on a road, that can be a good spot, but it's probably not what we're going to do. Okay, let's see now. I'm going to continue. This route is now going to include up and downhill all together. And I'm just going to click my way through here. Double click. And I've completed it. So this will be Lake to Happy. Okay, so you've got one big blob. Great. Another way to do this is to separate those things out and to have multiple. Let's create a folder. So now you're getting into some season-long organizational potential. And let's call this Stevens. Great. Now I've added that to the folder, but let's try a different style. Building a plan again. Okay, let's start here. We'll go with the snap to, why not? Okay. And I'm going to call that coal. I'm going to do one more here. Oops. Undo. Point draw is going to help me out there. And this one now I can start to color code. Let's call that red. And this is, I'm going to call this Northwest Pole. Add that to folder. That's in my Stevens. So this allows you to start to customize your own maps. And then what is cool here is, let's go to my content. That's my Stevens folder. Now I've drawn all this out, all of my ideas. I can take that and share it. And that link I can email to a friend, and then they'll have that. One of the things that is not possible to do on Onyx right now is to collaborate. So if I send that out to somebody, they're only going to have my ideas for the day, and we would have to be in agreement on that. But honestly, like I've spent a fair amount of time, for example, with Josh here on the phone for our tour plans, tapping collaboratively on CalTopo. So I'll show you how that can work here. and working out our tour plan for the day. So it's a great process when you're not necessarily in the same place as your tour planning, but now we have Zoom or FaceTime or the phone plus these collaborative maps. So Onyx doesn't do that yet. So I want to show you how to add that in. Okay, so the time planning, I still need to get to for you, and the collaboration. Those are the big, as well as one more layer that I want to show you on CalTopo. So those three things we'll get to on CalTopo. That is a basic rundown for Onyx and how to use it. Oh, I'm sorry, except for the whole big deal here in viewing the terrain differently. We have layers here. This is a hybrid that gives you topo lines plus tree cover. That's a nice way to view terrain. And there's just straight up satellite. Really great for Washingtonians that are curious about the tree cover of where you want to go skiing. You can additionally turn on the slope angle. The error in slope angle can be significant. So really this is not meant to help you manage your exposure. It's meant to be a tool in route planning to steer your eye towards areas that minimize your exposure to steep terrain, for example. Slope aspect, when we do have an avalanche forecast that calls for specific aspects with an avalanche problem, this can be really useful, really draws out the terrain. You're like, okay, it's blue, north aspect, we just don't go. Very relevant in snowpacks where there are more common season-long persistent weak layers that may be more on one aspect than another. This one here I mentioned, this is becoming more popular. Again, this came from Canada, and this is the avalanche terrain exposure scale. It is not updated for everywhere. It is updated for Snoqualmie Pass, but not for Stevens. This gives you an overlay. I'm not going to dive into that now, but that is a tool that is worth checking out. And those are the big ones. Okay. One more thing here. This is an important one. With satellite, especially early and late season, we are often curious about how much snow is out there. So this will show just quite high quality imagery. That's what I currently have on. But if I go to snow, it's going to look like that, and recent. That is going to be within about 2 weeks, I believe, is what they've said. This helps me see where there is snow coverage. So that's a great tool. Okay. Rapid fire with Onyx. I'm going to shift over to CalTopo. Josh, have you seen any questions before I move away from Onyx?
Yeah, while you're transitioning, there's a great question just about CalTopo versus Onyx.
Right.
And so someone who's already using CalTopo, I would say, there's a lot of different mapping platforms out there, and what you're comfortable with, if that works for your trip planning process, like keep using that. I don't feel like you need to switch to one or the other. I find, and you'll see here as Lyra demonstrates CalTopo, it maybe isn't quite as intuitive as like smooth user friendly for an intro user as Onyx is. There are more details. So if you like knowing like the snowpack element, or sorry, the snow coverage, seasonal snow coverage, like those updated satellite imagery, you can find that in CalTopo, and it'll tell you like it's the name of the satellite that they use for it. So like Sentinel or their Modus. So it's a little more technical and takes a little bit more time to adjust to, but yeah, sometimes there are more options available within CalTopo for certain features. I wouldn't say one is necessarily better than the other. It's kind of relative to what interface you're looking for.
Cool. Okay, so the 3 gaps that I'm going to approach here with CalTopo is a couple layers I want to show you. That Sentinel Weekly one that Josh mentioned. time planning, and collaboration. So 3 things for CalTopo that Onyx can't yet do. I personally do use CalTopo and Onyx, both, because especially if I'm going somewhere new and it's like an area that has one of those beacon guidebooks, I like to have the local resource on the standard ski descents and the common local names for them. So when I'm traveling, that's really useful to me. And even locally as well, there's lots of named runs that I don't have memorized. So going back to what that looks like here, that is Moonlight Bowl, Stormies. Those are pretty popular ones, but then you might get over here and there's like, that's called Silver Fir, but it's next to Center Bowl and North Trees versus Big Trees. So useful to have shared language around these things, especially when communicating with your parties in the field. Okay. So I'm going to build up one thing here in planning. So I am signed in. I have my account logged in here. I'm going to add a line. And this has me snap to OSM. So language is all a little bit funkier too. Onyx has done a good job of taking all this like technical language and making it in more like normal speak. But this is snap to OSM. All right, I'm going to park here. For this ascent, it does to Skyline Lake. It does roughly follow that road. Okay. Now I have to name this map. I'm going to call it Stevens. Great. Here I now have an option to share this map. And if I just make that public or anyone here with the map's URL, can save that. And then, oops, that's not what I'm doing. Okay, then here is where I create, this is always a little bit fiddly. It's not CalTopo, but the thing with it is it's not as intuitive and flowy, but there's a lot of power to it. So I always have to like poke around every time I use it, I swear. Here was, I'm gonna go back and show you that again. So this is just this information. I've created a map, I've named it. Has one thing on it so far. I'm gonna give it one more thing. I'm gonna put Stormies on here. So Stormies runs, where does it go? Out there, something like that. Here I can add, call that Stormies. I'm going to keep that color. This I'm going to call Skyline. I'm going to color it blue. I can even play with the shape of it. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to add a marker right there. Oops, sorry. There. So it adds it automatically. I'm going to move it right there. I'm going to call that break. In the comments, this is fancy. Wait for it. We're going to come back to that 20 minutes because I'm going to take a 20-minute break. Okay, we'll come back to that. So we've got all the makings of a really simple plan here. We're going to the lake, maybe skiing Stormies, taking a break right there. Okay, with all of that, I can share this now with a shareable link, and I can give those I can create a link so that others can read it, update it, or write. So if I'm sharing it with a friend, I'm going to say, okay, I want someone to be able to write on it. There's a QR code. So all of you can now, if any of you are quick enough, go ahead and snag that and see if you can add to my map. That'll be a good challenge. So if some of you are pretty up on your mapping, I'm going to keep this open and we'll see if anyone adds to my map here. So this is just a scan on your phone. This right number, there is a way to put that on your yeah, gosh, what's it called? The link, your web link. And you put that number, but you have to put an M. So it's just caltopo/m/that number, and that will put it on your desktop. Okay, we'll see if anyone is quick enough with that one. And also I can just copy. This is a link that works as well. So that'll get people to that. So I can email that to a friend. Okay. All right. So we have created a shareable. So now this is shared with my backcountry partners, all 100 of you, potentially, or whoever was fast enough with your thumbs to get that link. Now, I'm curious, how long is this going to take me? This does require a subscription, a paid one. So here again, I'll go do that one more time. I just clicked on my up track and you'll see lots of options here. I've already edited it to have a name and change the color. I can look at the profile. It tells me the elevation gain. Tour planning with this on your phone is a nightmare because all these things are really tiny. Pro tip. Close that one again. Okay, click on that again. What else have I got? Terrain stats. Ooh. Similar. 1.16 miles, 4,600 to 5,100 feet. That's a gain of just over 1,000 feet. Okay, but one more. Travel time. It's going to give you route numbers here for hiking pace, off-trail pace, ski pace. Or this is a super cool thing for those of you that really want to geek out on tour planning. Notice I put that little break and I said 20 minutes. I'll go back. So I just took a little waypoint with this marker, add marker, and I put it right on my up track. Now, when I click on the up track, go to travel time, travel plan. This gives me a tour plan, including the break that I planned in there for 20 minutes. So for those of you that do really feel like you really need to see the full breakdown, this is a cool tool. I don't often use it, but I have several colleagues who do. It's super cool. And the other thing here that I use a lot is toggling this to custom rate. So notice these numbers. These are what's called a Munter scale. Onyx does not have this yet integrated. You can find this calculation online by Googling, or a great, I buried my phone under repair kit items. You can also get an app that's called Guide Pace. And it's a really simple tool. Looks like this. That's a Guide Pace app. I think it costs like $5 or something. Maybe it's free by now. And it gives you this screen, very similar to what you're seeing here. It's just a known calculation called the Munter rate calculation. And it gives you a constant for the original calculation uses meters, but it's been changed for those of us who don't use meters. And your up rate, your flat rate, and your down rate are all going to be different. Those constants calculate the speed relative to your change in the terrain. So ski, that's not quite right. Often I find the ski down is a little faster. And beginning of the season versus end of season, when I'm maybe a little bit fitter at the end of the season, I might boost this. This might be 6. This can be as much as 8. And then down might be 20. Really fit. That gives you a slightly different tour time plan. So great tool to give you, it's another tool to help you wrap your head around that time planning element, which especially in the Northwest in our short days can be a critical part. One more thing, and then I'll turn it over to questions. Okay, so we've shared it, and I don't see anybody with things on the map. Darn, I was hoping I would get something. Nothing? Okay, well, we'll move on. So we shared the map. We showed the time plan. And now look at the layers. So you got a lot more layer options. Onyx is nice. It's tidy. It's much more clear what you're doing with it. They're really aesthetic, easy to use, way more mobile friendly. There's fewer of them in general, but they're very backcountry ski focused. So it's a great app for all of those things. CalTopo I use year round for all the things. What we have on here that I like a lot, This Map Builder Topo, if you look closely, it is a Map Builder Hybrid is actually my favorite. What just happened? Look closely. That's just a topo in a certain style. This is a hybrid, and you can see it overlays at a certain transparency without my having to do it myself. I can overlay multiple layers myself and really like have, 30% satellite, 50% topo, all these things to get just the look that I want. So it's very powerful. But for this one, it's all overlaid for me already. So it includes topo lines plus tree cover that you can see it now under it with snow. Okay. But now, two more things I want you to see. Here's one to throw in your back pocket. This is one to take notes of. NAIP, super weird. Okay, but we're going to go down there. You have to change a couple things. NAIP, false color. Okay, nothing changed, right? That's because I'm on 0%. So wait for it. 100%. Whoa, what just happened? This was shared with me years ago as a tool when you are exploring new areas. It is a tool that's really helpful. It visually to see tree cover. So great Pacific Northwest beta for skiers in the area, skiers, snowmobilers, snowshoers, snow boarders, all the things, all the snow sports people, ice climbers also. We deal with a lot of trees, especially at mid elevations. So you can see if I just toggle, oops, that's just normal color. But when you use that false color, it helps you see that definition, that tree cover just a little bit better. So that can allow you to connect terrain. One reason I think this is also really important is some of our older guidebooks were drafted as much as 30 years ago. And some ski descents that were classic at the time have grown in significantly. I've gone out to ski a few of them and it's very annoying. And there's, especially if it's lower snow, they're now classic descents that really, you got to wait till much later in the season because they're all these little tiny trees that are super annoying because they're growing back. So that's a good update. One more layer for you, and then I'll stop talking. This one, Sentinel Weekly. Why did it just go white? Okay, there's 0%. We're 100% on Sentinel Weekly. It's on latest. The pitch with this one, it gives you the most current snow cover aerial image. The problem is clouds. That didn't work. I think it's all cloudy. It has been super overcast for a while. Hold on. There we go. Oh, there was one. There's a lot of data that's all white, so it's not loading. Darn. Cloudy, cloudy, cloudy. There's a little bit of break in the clouds from December 1st. Great. Okay. Okay, lots of notes. Hopefully your thumbs are not too tired from taking all of those notes. This will be available to you to go back through with the recording. Lots of little tidbits of information in there for you to go off in a variety of directions. That is all that I have for you on the tour planning before I pass it to Josh. Did I get any other questions, Josh?
There was one more, just another app. So we're looking at a lot of these mapping interfaces on a desktop computer, but most of these also have phone app interfaces. And one question was about Gaia, which is a super common app on a phone. And that's an excellent one on the phone. Their desktop interface isn't really that great. CalTopo has both app and desktop. I think it's a bit better on the desktop. Onyx, I believe, kind of started more as an app phone interface, but you got to see their desktop as well. So Gaia is a great one. And there, what I often do is I might do some of my tour planning in Caltopo, and then you can export those files to put on your app like Gaia or something else if you want.
Totally. Yeah, the usability of Gaia has been nice. And like, in all honesty, I have all three on my phone, and I find it easier to tour plan in Gaia on the fly. There have been some problems, so I would just make sure that you're have a couple options. Gaia has glitched out significantly on me in recent time, and so just caution with that. I'm not sure what was happening, but a bunch of us had it just completely crash in the field, and that was not awesome. So there is a level of redundancy, even though it seems absurd to have 3 mapping apps on your phone. You know, I'm not usually carrying a paper map with me anymore, but I do have 3 mapping apps, so maybe that hedges my bets.
And one last question, just for beginner tours recommendation.
We're gonna get to that at the end. Yeah, I'll give you a list.
And I assume maybe that's for navigation, like interface. If you don't have any interface, Onyx is a pretty user-friendly, easy one to enter into. I don't know if you have anything more to say about that, Lyra.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Yeah. Yeah, there, it gives you a lot of those basic ideas. We'll go over this at the end, but that's our next step. So we'll give you some, you can screenshot this as well as I pass it on to Josh.
Great, well, thanks, Lyra. So this next section, we're gonna focus on just overall conditions. So that could be your avalanche and snow conditions, as well as weather. And just looking through the poll, it looks like we have quite a few experienced folks, and also plenty of folks who are just beginning. So we'll try to address both ends of it. But I'm going to I'm going to assume that through an avalanche course, you're going to get a lot of focus on the avalanche forecast and talking about avalanche hazard and how to avoid the dangerous areas and where you can go that's less dangerous. So I'm not going to talk as much about that, but I am really interested to get folks' questions. I'll try to pause and have it be a bit of interactive as I go through things. But first, I'm going to just start showing you a little bit of what we have to offer at NWAC and what our website provides. And then I'll give you some other tools, especially on the weather end and weather forecast end, to try to understand conditions before you go out to have a successful tour and ideally get some good skiing and riding. So I'm going to go ahead and share my video here. Let's see. And should all be seeing my get like the tunnel of Zoom here. And there we go. So hopefully you can see my cursor. Oh, let's see. Well, hopefully you can see my cursor here. I think I updated Zoom recently, and there we go. There's a few settings I have to change here. Can't see my password. Let's see. There we go. Now you can see my cursor a little better. So hopefully folks have checked out the NWAC website. If you're totally new to touring, maybe you've never been here, but nwac.us, so we're the Northwest Avalanche Center. I'm an avalanche forecaster for NWAC, along with being a ski guide and educator. But in the winter, my primary role and most of my work focuses on producing these avalanche forecasts. And so we have different zones that we produce avalanche forecasts for. You can see how there's different colors. And for some of you, this may be like old news. You know what all of this means. But I think one thing that's really important to know that I'll say before I talk about other places you can go from here is understanding the zone boundaries. Like, this might seem pretty simple, but it is important to know where the edge of these boundaries are. so that especially if you're going into certain places that might be near the edge, or if you're say on a snowmobile or doing a multi-day tour where you might actually be crossing into different boundaries. So here on our website, you can really zoom in. This is the Snoqualmie Pass zone, and you can get a more nuanced look at where is the edge of this boundary. So around Cabin Creek is the eastern edge of the Snoqualmie Pass zone. Also, Caltopo and a few other apps will also show these zone overlays as well. So it's important to know where you're going and make sure that you're pulling up the correct forecast when you do that. I think a really important note is that these boundaries are not, while they're displayed as these hard lines, we know as snow scientists and as people who are in the mountains that the weather and snowpack and avalanche phenomena happen on a spectrum. They don't just stop at the edge of one zone and start up on the other side. So we'll talk about that in our avalanche forecasts. We might say, if we're talking about the East Central zone here, we might say that snow totals have been higher on the western edge of that zone, and they're lower in the eastern edge, like the Wenatchee Mountains. That's super common, and a lot of zones will specify that. Like another really interesting one is our west-south zone. So that includes Mount Rainier, like Paradise is a great access point there, as well as Crystal Mountain, another super common spot. They're very close to each other, but they have very different snowpacks. And a lot of times the forecasters for that zone will really specify the difference between conditions at Mount Rainier and Crystal Mountain, which is just over the way, sorry, over here. So look for those nuances within the zone. I'm gonna kind of take a step back and just show you a few more things that we have on the website, and we'll dive deeper into those later on. So some of the menus that we have up here, we don't just issue avalanche forecasts, but we also issue weather forecasts. So under forecasts, right at the top, front and center, you have avalanche. Also have the mountain weather forecast there. You can also look at older forecasts. So that's what's archived, both for avalanche and weather. And then observations, you get quite a list here, but the recent observations, this will take you to snow and avalanche observations, which we'll dive into a little bit later. There's also a whole host of weather stations and ways that you can view the weather stations. Lots of other stuff to look at there too. So you can really dork out and dive deep if you want to, but also we try to make it accessible, all of these resources accessible for folks who are new to it. So let's focus in on two different avalanche forecasts. And we're gonna start off with today's forecast, actually. It was issued today. It will be for tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry, it was yesterday's forecast because it wasn't, today's wasn't pulled up when I started this. And this is what Andy wrote for today's conditions. And so low danger, green, pretty safe. I think sometimes we'll say this, like, it doesn't mean that there's no danger out there, but it's important to know, the way that the avalanche danger scale works. And we've got the list down here. You can also pull up here a more detailed version of it. And this might seem like, oh, maybe this is just like if you don't know what it means, but we as forecasters spend a lot of time reading these danger scale descriptors, and sometimes really mulling over, well, is it considerable or is it moderate today? And at which elevations? So we read these quite a bit too, and you should as well. From there, I'm not going to go through all of these elements. Like I said, I'm going to assume that an avalanche course will give you a lot of this. And feel free to, if you do have questions, to ask about this, and we can dive in later. But what we want to do is look at, what did Andy say that might clue us in about where it might be good to go, what might be places we might want to avoid, in addition to the dangerous areas, like where the avalanche danger is and where the avalanche problems are. We already know, based on this wind slab problem, which is unlikely. You know, he has it here because maybe there's a slim chance you might encounter this problem, but he does show those at upper and middle elevations, not at the low elevations. But what else can we glean from this forecast to tell us where we might want to go? And if you all want on your own, feel free to pull up a browser and look at this to find this exact one. If you click on the Snoqualmie Pass here, and then that'll bring you here. And then you can, this is how you find the archive. So this one's today's, which is also low. And then this is the one that we're looking at for the 11th, is the forecast issued for today's conditions. So if you spend some time reading through this, there are a few things that you'll find in the text that point us towards what we might encounter when we travel out there and what we want to expect beyond the avalanche danger. So I actually highlighted some of that I just pulled it up into a PDF. So if you did want to have like a printed out version of this, you can print this. Oh, I will plug that we also have the Avi app, which I can put a link to, but that's the best way to look at a forecast on your phone. But you can also print this to PDF. You could print the PDF, download it, but you can also do things like highlight it. This is a great way for you to hone your critical reading skills and understand the forecast. So this third line in the bottom line, you'll need to contend with early season travel conditions, particularly down low. Any thoughts on what he means there? Take a second, like early season travel conditions that you'll have to contend with. So this is maybe not a good thing. So what he's getting at is it's shallow cover. If you've been out at Snoqualmie Pass, you'll see, yes, Cheryl, low coverage, you got it. You can't ski right from the car, and you probably won't ski right back to your car at Snoqualmie Pass. Some other places you might, but so that means you might be hiking. It means where you can put skis on, you might have logs to step over. So some other little nuggets as we scroll down here, getting down into the forecast discussion. This is where forecasters will put a lot of those things that sit in the back of our heads that maybe it's not the first piece of information we want to tell people, but we think it's important enough to include in the forecast. And so this line here, southerly slopes are thinner and heavier than shaded aspects where you can still find cold, dry snow. So if you're a skier or a rider, which I think most of you probably are here, so southerly slopes, one, the coverage isn't going to be as good there, right? There's going to be thinner snowpack. The snow quality will probably be heavier or maybe even crusty. So not so good for the downhill. So I want to go to the shaded aspects where you can find cold, dry snow. That sounds like powder to me. So, you know, we do put these nuances in, like we don't always tell people, hey, go ski this run today. Actually, we never do, but we will put in indicators of where you can find good conditions. And those things do dovetail pretty well into the avalanche danger. You can think about, if you know some of the processes that happen in the snowpack, those cold slopes, if they stay cold for long enough, you might get faceting happening on the surface or some weakening of that upper snowpack. That also makes, when it is the snow on the surface, that makes for good skiing and riding. If that's buried, that could then be a weak layer. So let's jump to another forecast. We'll do the same thing. So this is the, oops. This is the Stevens forecast. This is an older one. I pulled up a little different one, mostly because I wrote it, but also because it has something else going on here. We have moderate danger. And just as we read this, if you all were out this past weekend or paying attention to conditions, you know that we got a bunch of snow. And we had some different conditions going on. Andy's forecast we looked at before was a couple days later. So these wind slabs were still there, but the danger had eased. And we go to that PDF to see, like, well, what else can we glean from this? Right at the beginning, I talk about a big storm and that the day the forecast day is going to bring sunny skies and moderate temperatures. So the sun, like that's great. That means we'll be able to see around. That also means I might expect some warming of south-facing slopes. So that could impact both my ski quality as well as maybe some avalanche conditions. But this tells me, oh, we've got a bunch of new snow out there. As I come into the avalanche problem description, so here I talk about that the winds have tapered off. So there was wind previously. It's not blowing anymore. And relating to this avalanche problem, you're going to have to look for clues, not just blowing snow, but clues within the snowpack to find these wind slab avalanche conditions. And I'm talking about on leeward slopes. So I go into that further specific to the avalanche danger. But that also clues you into like, okay, it recently has been windy. I can expect a wind effect out there, creating avalanche conditions, but also maybe creating some wind affected skiing and riding conditions. And then as we go further, I'm talking about the sun again, because the sun was an element that day for sure. And I give you some nuance of like, we're basically coming up on the equinox, and right now the sun's super low and the sun's power is pretty weak. So while the sun will be out, it's not going to warm the south aspects like it would say in March or April. So a little indicator to the nuance of how that sun's going to affect the snow, and specifically where. Notice I'm talking about steep south aspects. That's because the slopes have to be really steep to be perpendicular to the sun in order for the sun to have an effect. If you're on a south aspect and that slope angle is really low, like 15 degrees or low enough that you're barely sliding down the slope, the sun's not going to have very much effect on it right now. But as the sun gets higher and stronger throughout the winter, it will be able to affect the lower angle slopes. So that kind of helps us. Like we could probably get on some south aspects that are low angle and still have good skiing and riding conditions on this day. Here I go further into how much recent snow came in. So like, there's a lot of ways that we indicate not just the danger, but what kinds of skiing and riding conditions you'll find out there. I think that's about all I could pull out of there. Yeah. And feel free, if you have questions, post them in the Q&A. Would love to get folks' interest and be able to dive into specific products or parts of our website that you have questions about. So I'm going to shift. First, we'll talk a little bit about observations on the snow and weather end, and then we'll shift over to weather, both in forecast and observations. So if you've looked at snow and weather observations before, this might be familiar to you. So again, you get here by going to observations, recent observations, and it pulls up this map. And this is super powerful. You'll notice even right now, this is default to, you can see this date over here. So it's a range. It's like 5-day range set, but you can change that. And there's a lot of things you can do to customize here. So like one of the first things is just looking at a specific zone. If you want to go to the Snoqualmie Pass area, just click there, and that automatically filters out a lot of things you don't want to look at, or might not be the most pertinent to where you're going to go. You can also look just at avalanches that were observed. So that's really helpful. And you'll notice that they're color coded over here in red. I'm not going to dive super deep into this. This is a really, really powerful tool. You can spend a lot of time with it. There's all sorts of visualization that you can do, especially with the avalanches. This is pretty helpful. So right now we're visualizing, and we have all zones highlighted. And most of this will pertain to avalanches that are observed. And so here we have it by zone. Here we have it by the trigger and size. You can see how the colors relate. So red is larger. And then you can also show aspect and elevation. These dots, the larger the dots are, the higher the numbers. And if you want to see the exact numbers, you can see that we've had quite a lot on northeast and interestingly on south. Why do you think we've seen a lot of avalanches on the south? Anyone can answer if you want. We had a big storm, right? I think those avalanches were occurring during the storm on south. Probably not as much, but then it just got super sunny, and that was the big input that caused avalanches, especially in that new snow on south aspects. So a lot that you can see here. If we just go back to observations, this is, oops, we'll unclick avalanches. I'm going to pull up an observation that was put in today. So this was Katie Warren and Peyton Schiff. Peyton's one of our new forecasters based in Clay Elum, Roslyn area. So she'll be forecasting East Central and East South quite a bit. And as you read through this, a lot of times, different people are going to submit observations in different ways. This is a pretty thorough one. It's from 2 forecasters. And, as you look here, you'll see descriptions of avalanches. They'll talk about snow surfaces. They talk about signs of instability, like isolated cracking. They'll talk about their goals, like they went to look for reactive wind slabs at upper elevations. And so, sometimes there'll be elements that are specific to the snowpack that also clue you into ski and ride conditions. So westerly aspects held a 2 to 3 centimeter breakable crust over the recent snow. That sounds like bad skiing there. While northerly aspects held soft, dry snow that's beginning to become weak and sugary. So that sounds like good skiing, but by this coming weekend, if that gets buried, that could be our weak link. So you can really see how these 2 elements of like ski and ride conditions and snowpack information start to dovetail. Pictures are great. Whether you're submitting pictures or whether you're looking at observations, super helpful. Like looking through this terrain, I probably don't want to ski right over this stuff. That right there looks like we have some big gnarly wind features, probably pretty stiff snow, and then almost looks like scoured old crust right here. Pretty bulletproof looking to me. There's a lot we can glean from all of these. So yeah, there's a lot here in the observations. If folks are interested and want to talk more about that later, we can dive into that further. I'm going to switch gears to the weather end. So starting with the avalanche forecast, you do get, if you're at the top here and you scroll all the way down, each zone gives you a pretty basic, slimmed down weather forecast in this table. And we start with temperatures, snow levels, which sometimes you'll see represented as freezing levels if there's no snow in the forecast. And that's an automatic switch if there's snow forecasted versus not. Winds and a little description. So if you want more than that, at NWAC, you can certainly go to our mountain weather page. You'll find that up here under forecast mountain weather. And that pulls up much more thorough weather forecast for the entire area, like Canadian border all the way down to Mount Hood. This synopsis is pretty nice if you really like diving into the details. And if you want to have further your understanding of weather phenomena and mountain weather phenomena. There might be things in here that might be, if you're not that up on weather, it might be hard to understand or just might be terminology you're not used to. So, use that will and to your interest and to your uses, right? So not all of these tools are going to be for everyone. There are a few sections I want to hit on here. So this forecast is definitely produced for our forecasters to then issue an avalanche forecast. We do certainly tailor it towards folks like you all as well. One part is the precipitation. You'll notice that these are these kind of like decimal amounts. We're not talking about feet of snow or inches of snow that'll fall, but we're talking about the amount of water, liquid water equivalent in the preset, whether it's rain or whether it's snow. And it is worth noting, like on this one, especially because this is pretty prominent here, has the LT. That means less than. And that'll only show up if you have really small amounts, like 1/10 of an inch of water is not very much. But you can convert this to snow, like a real quick shorthand is just multiplying by 10. So for most of these zones for Thursday night, they're thinking of less than 1 inch of snow. The Mount Baker ski area will get less than 2.5 inches of snow. So that's, I mean, it doesn't always work out that way, but that's a pretty good quick lay conversion. And it's worth noting that because I think this is something that, yeah, can baffle folks sometimes. I already mentioned the freezing level element. And, you know, it's worth knowing that when it's snow levels, it can, the air temperature, especially in Washington, can be a little above freezing and you can have snow falling. That does happen. So that's taken into consideration with this. And, you know, another element, just with the winds, this might be, if you spend a lot of time with weather, this might be, you might know this already, but it's not the most intuitive. So when winds are listed, in this case, for the Olympic Mountains for Wednesday evening, we have southeast 10 to 20. So this is listed in miles per hour, 10 to 20 miles an hour. Those are the averages over that period, which is essentially like a 6-hour period. But SE, so that's southeast winds. That means the winds are coming out of the southeast. So if you're facing in a southeast direction, the wind would be blowing into your face. And if we think about wind transported snow, that means the wind is stripping snow off of southeast aspects and depositing it onto northwest aspects. So I think it's good to just illuminate that because sometimes wind directions are tricky to understand. But in general, weather forecasts will list a wind direction describing where the wind is blowing from, or they'll say like winds out of the southeast, if that makes sense. From there, wanted to show you a few tools outside of what we have at NWAC that might be really helpful for weather. And again, feel free to throw those questions in the Q&A. I really want to know what you want to know. So National Weather Service, this is a great spot to start, and maybe a lot of you already go here, but NOAA or weather.gov, best place to get here. And from there, you can type in the location you want to know. But for us going into the mountains, you know, you can type an approximate, like I could type in Stevens Pass, WA. That should get me close enough. But what I like to do is I come down to this point forecast here. So this little map, you can scroll around and you can click and you see that it gives you, it doesn't give you an exact point, it'll give you a box. And there's a lot of terrain within that box, but it averages out the elevations within that box. And it's worth knowing, this is a computer. Humans do tweak these numbers on a real coarse scale, but what you get out of here is a computer output from weather models and how the forecasters tweak those models for the day. And so I can click on, this is the area that Lyra was trip planning in. So if I wanted to get a forecast for Skyline Lake, that's what I've clicked on there. And when you get that, you can also look a little further here. It's giving me an elevation of 4,879 feet. And it'll also give you like what the center of that point is. So that's worth knowing. Like that's great ski terrain. That's kind of a great, right at the lower part of our low elevations and transitioning into middle elevations for a lot of NWAC forecast zones. And I think this is pretty self-explanatory here. Like I think most people have probably seen this, you know, under the NOAA forecast. I will say, and this isn't just because I work for NWAC, I think the NWAC precip numbers are probably the most accurate you're going to get out there for the mountains. They're not always right. But I do like to look at what does the National Weather Service say as well. When they're both saying the same thing, that's a really good sign. That's probably what's going to happen. But often I find they're not the same. But this will give you a percentage chance of snow, It gives you a little bit more intuitive interface than what the NWAC mountain weather forecast has to offer. There's also nice little icons and colors, and from here, a few more maybe like finer level or more advanced to intermediate kind of places you can go for the mountain weather. I really like looking at this hourly forecast, and that will pull up these time-based tables. So it has it in hourly intervals. This is for that exact point that I pulled up, and you can customize this a bunch. I'm not going to dive into all these different elements, but one thing that's really helpful is blue sky cover. So it'll tell you a percentage of how much the sky is covered at different times of the day. This is super helpful, way finer detail than what you'd find on that last page we were looking at, or also at the more detail than what we offer for the mountain weather forecast. Yeah, you can also see the likelihood of snow or precip. There's a lot there to look at. And then maybe a deeper dive. And this is probably one of the few products in NOAA where you can really see what a human has directly had their hand in. So forecast discussion here. Now this is real techy. If you're really into weather, I'd highly recommend this. If you're just trying to figure out like basics, you might skip this or save this for a different time. But this forecast discussion is written by the hand of a human, and they talk about all sorts of things. They'll tell you about weather models that they're preferring. They'll name those. They might say the GFS model or the Euro model. Here they say deterministic models. So and ensemble models, all sorts of stuff. If you want to dive deeper into weather, you can. This is like a great stepping off point. I always found this was a great way to increase my understanding of meteorology and get a better insight into what the actual forecaster is thinking. Now, not the first place I'll go, just when I want to know what's going to happen today. I haven't seen any questions come through the Q&A. Lyra, anything on your end?
Yeah, we got one in the chat from Jake is saying that NOAA always seems pessimistic, but I was asking if that means if pessimistic in this webinar context means they're only calling for a few inches of snow, but actually they always say it's stormy. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So does that match your experience, Josh, that NOAA says like, oh, there's always a storm, but it doesn't really pan out?
Okay. Yeah, like,
Good question.
I wouldn't say so. In the forecasting world, sometimes we talk about over forecasting or under forecasting, meaning like the forecast says there's going to be more snow than what actually showed up, or under would be like they only called for a couple inches and it snowed a foot. I think on my level, no, I don't necessarily see NOAA being one way or the other. Like they always say it's going to snow more than it does. In the winter, I actually find the level that I'm at, I'm not reading this page I have pulled up. I'm not paying attention as much to this level of NOAA forecast as I am for my uses. Like I read this a bunch. I don't have a great answer for you, but I would say I don't see them going one way or the other. I do see that sometimes, well, and I'll say this, the closer in time we are to the forecast, so like tonight's forecast versus looking out at Monday nights, like any forecast is going to be more accurate for a shorter duration, like the closer we are to that forecast coming to fruition. So I do find that's also true with NOAA. They're way better, in the 12-hour to 24-hour than many days out.
Totally. That's a good one. Josh, maybe I have like a parallel question that might provide also some answer that you could speak to. When I used to live in the Eastern Sierra, I lived there for like 4 years of drought. And I learned at the time the term virga, V-I-R-G-A, which is rain that's falling from the sky but doesn't reach the ground. And also was looking perhaps like Jake here, I would look at the forecast and it would getting on towards the winter in the winter. And like the 10-day forecast was like, oh, we're gonna get this huge storm. And then at 5 days out, it was like, oh, it's a medium-sized storm. And then 3 days out, it was like, oh, we're gonna get a few inches. And then the day before, nothing. And then it would just be like Virga down over Bishop and no snow in the mountains. And that I learned in that, not really knowing much about weather forecasts, but I learned at that time to trust, to watch for the trend more than any single like stated forecast. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. So no, that's a really good point. So yeah, if you pay attention to weather forecasts and the actual weather that hits the ground enough, you'll get to see those trends. And that's an awesome part of building your observational skills, whether it's to recreate or to be your own, recreational weather forecaster. And there are definitely times where, like, it could be that drought winter that you were experiencing, or what I often see is in transition periods, whether it's transitioning from fall to winter, winter to spring, or just larger weather pattern changes, that I can see those trends pretty well. So like if we're dead in the middle of winter and the forecasts seem to be relatively accurate, I'll sometimes see that where I can tell that the last storm, NOAA or NWAC or whatever, even forecast models, that they were pretty accurate. Maybe it wasn't exactly how many inches showed up, but within a couple inches is pretty accurate. So if I see that with one storm and then I see it with another storm, then I have higher confidence going into the third storm to trust that forecast. Versus like what you're talking about, Lyra, which we do often see, where you look at a forecast for, say, in this case, Saturday night or Saturday, looks like 100% chance of snow Friday night into Saturday. That's awesome. If I'm making plans for the weekend, I'm super psyched that maybe we'll have a powder day. But sometimes you'll see the pattern of, as it gets closer, that storm maybe fizzles out. So like 5 days out, the forecast looks really good for snow. And then it gets weaker and weaker, and then you only get 1 inch coming through. And if you see that time after time, then you'll see noticing that trend that Lyra was talking about. And that can give you, maybe not, you have less confidence in the forecast, but it starts to give you an understanding of what the trend of the forecast versus the reality of the weather is. Yeah, and we'll see that both with produced forecasts like this, which are, a weather forecaster has a hand in, as well as weather models too. And in this case, like in the discussion, as well as the NWAC mountain weather, the forecaster here will also speak to that sometimes. Like the language they might use is things like models are in good agreement. That means all the models are showing the same thing. That means confidence is high that what is forecast will actually happen. Another thing they'll say is like there's poor agreement with between the models. So that means the confidence is low. We don't really know what's going to happen. There's if you read critically, you can see other ways in which forecasters will state their certainty in what they're putting out.
And Josh, when you're like I'm always teaching my students that these weather forecasts, given the written one from NWAC, is, if you're able to read it in depth, it is just a wealth of knowledge and so spot on, because those forecasters are humans who live in this mountain range, and it's really complex. And when you're talking about the various models, I'm assuming that they're also integrating multiple different types of models at that time. Is that true? Like that they're putting the information? Yeah. And then those models, an important and interesting thing there that I always found really helpful to my learning about how it all works, is those models all have different time that they're able to forecast. And if it's a shorter amount of time, that usually means they're able to forecast for a smaller area on the land. And when you're dealing with mountainous terrain, where like what would you call that? what would you call it? The
Kind of like the
the
grid, the
grid
model
size?
grid. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
like that size makes a big difference in a mountain weather forecast.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're on the level of like, I'm just trying to get a decent forecast and understand like what I might expect when I go out there, going to things like the mountain weather forecast and oops, and the uh NOAA forecast, like these are things that forecasters have had hands in. It's not so much like raw um output. So it's kind of tailored for you more. If you want to dive deeper into like those weather models, there's a lot of places you can go for that. And yeah, if I don't have the chat up, but I'm just going to put it out there. If folks, we do have a little bit more time. If folks want to dive into some weather models, just put it in the chat and Q&A, like a thumbs up, or and we can certainly do that. And I can talk more about what Lyra is talking about. I can look at. I was going to bring up Windy, which is a great, pretty accessible site for looking at weather forecasts that a human hasn't had a hand in as much, but it's a way you can look at weather models, and I think a fairly accessible way you can look at them. Also, if you have other questions just about forecasts, whether it's the NWAC products, avalanche forecasts, the observations, throw that in the chat. Do a little poll, see what people want.
I've got another while we're waiting
Yeah,
to
go
see if
for it.
anyone has questions. It's also somewhat related and something I think we've probably talked about, but as we get increasing in my career, certainly an increasing number of weather anomaly years, aka ENSO or El Nino Southern Oscillation, like we are experiencing more and more El Nino and La Nina weather events. And I keep looking at them and I find myself just from one year to the next saying like, oh, the weather's so weird this time. And then I'm like, go, hold on. Am I just being a human that's like has opinions and they're not grounded in truth? And that's usually the case. But also there's an element of our experience being like, wait. Like I have a lot of experience in the mountains and something's off. And one thing that was conveyed to me at some point was how little information we have comparatively on weather years where there's an El Nino or a La Nina cycle, and that can impact the quality or accuracy of our forecasts. Is that something that you feel to be true or that you find to be true?
Yeah. So like ENSO, La Nina, El Nino, there's other patterns too. Something else you might hear about is like Pacific decadal oscillation. These are large scale climatological patterns that can shift over time. And that's been happening forever. But we, of course, with climate change, like things are getting weirder. It's not just warmer, but it's also like unique. And yeah, uh, you know, weather records don't go that far back because really, well, at least in the way that that most meteorologists and weather forecasters, like they're basing it on kind of Eurocentric scientific data, right? Which only the recording only really came with colonization and much later after actually. So those records don't go that far back. And when we talk about things like weather and especially snow and avalanches, these are things on geologic time scale, like way longer than any of our lifetimes, and way longer than kind of our written records in this kind of scientific meteorological sense. So yeah, with the changes in weather, especially when we have like, say, a unique La Nina year, there's less. It's kind of like what I was talking about with weather models. If there's less data to base those patterns on, the weather models don't do as well, and then the forecaster confidence isn't as strong with those large scale patterns when they are in like a unique phase where there's not as much data, and then ultimately we're all like there's computers and models that are helpful for sure, and in some ways they work similar to our brains, but a lot of this is just pattern recognition. Just like you were talking about, as a person in the mountains, we learn to recognize patterns in so many ways, and that can keep us safe. That can also help us alert to when it's like something we haven't seen before. Whether it's in the weather, snowpack conditions or the terrain. So yeah, when you have less experience, whether it's a weather model or whether it's a human with patterns, there's just poor deduction, I guess, of that pattern recognition. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's super interesting. It makes it engaging.
Definitely. Do we get any answers to what folks want to hear more of next?
Not seeing anything. I think before people drop off too much, one more public service announcement you can probably speak to as well. I know in my rec programs, I always tell people like I love geeking out on weather and looking at all that stuff and figuring out like what I think is going to happen and I use that usually in this lens of looking for anticipating where I'm going to find good conditions. In terms of just strictly the hazard, when I'm teaching rec programs, I want my students to leave understanding that they have to read the NWAC product in order and understand that in relation to the forecast in order to shake out uncertainty. And can you speak a little to that? Because I know you similarly, like we were both in the industry and working, and I'm looking at all the models, and I'm like, and I don't want to tell people not to do that. And I want to make sure that they understand that that NWAC model is tied to, or what is stated in the NWAC site in terms of weather is tied to the forecast.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I can speak to kind of my experience of like how I write avalanche forecasts. So I don't write the mountain weather product. We have a handful of meteorologists on staff who do that, who also forecast for avalanches. But so the mountain weather product is really critical to our avalanche forecast, and a lot of our timing is based on it too. So like I'll sit down for the day, usually an hour before this weather forecast is issued, and I'll start looking into my observations, snowpack and avalanche observations. I'll look at weather stations. I'll look at all sorts of stuff. I'll look at other weather forecasts as well. And then once this comes out, which is usually right around 2 o'clock, then I'll dive deeper, and it gives me a better level of certainty. I especially really focus on the precip numbers in the mountain weather forecast, and freezing levels. I mean, I look at all of it, but I'll supplement individually as a forecaster. I'll supplement parts of this. Sometimes I do entirely my own weather forecast, but I do rely very heavily on this. And there's a lot of days that this is the only weather forecast I really consider or look at as heavily. And just like from a visual, this versus the NOAA forecast, it's different, right? And different learners have different preferences as far as like how you digest information. So if this works for you, like go for it. It's a really good source. It is the best source of mountain weather for our area in the winter, I find. And there's lots of other places you can go, like I showed you. If this just kind of makes your eyes cross and you're like, I don't really even know what I'm looking at, find something that does work for you. And hopefully it's this, but yeah. But I would, at the very least, make sure you pull up the correct forecast zone, right? If you're going to Stevens Pass, make sure you'll actually be within that zone and you're not so far east that you're in the East Central. And then come down here and note this stuff. Maybe even write it down in your notebook for the day, so you know that like, oh, okay, the temperatures are really going to warm throughout the day, or the sun's going to be out. Make those notes so you can anticipate what you're going to see and base your plan on that. So that's kind of my plug for it.
That's cool. It's neat to imagine like pull back the curtain a little bit of the forecaster, a day in the life of the forecaster. And even just the timing, the weather forecast comes out at 2, and then your forecast comes out at 6.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I mean, to dovetail, since we're kind of like, I mean, I for all of you, I guide for Alpine, but I also work for NWAC. But there's also lots of other places, and we'll talk about kind of next steps. But one quick one is the NWAC laying track series, which is pretty similar to what we're doing here, but it's specific to different topics. So you can see it here. and they're Wednesdays throughout January. I'll be doing the winter navigation one, which is focusing on just trip planning tools. We'll dive deeper into CalTopo and applying an avalanche forecast. I can speak a little bit about windy, or if you want to dive, I don't know if we want to dive into like next steps right now. Either one. I'll just
Maybe a quick
spend a
little
couple minutes.
orientation of windy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So windy.com, it's an awesome spot if you want to, again, these are weather models. This is not a human, weather models. Like sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, same as humans, but in different ways. And there's a lot here, but I find it's a great tool. And when you come to the homepage, it might just look like this. And try to navigate around all my Zoom stuff here. But one of the first things you can do if you want to get a big picture of what's going on, and this is a little bit of my process, but I think for like an intro to weather forecasting or just understanding the weather, I like to look at like, so this is satellite imagery. This is what has happened. This is essentially an observation of the clouds. And it's pretty short, but it kind of shows you, if you know things about weather, you can see there's like a little bit of like a what we'd call circulation here, like something's kind of spinning around, sort of looks like a hurricane or a tornado. It's not that intense, but it is a storm system, which those things are. You can also see boundaries between clouds and no clouds. And what really sticks out to me is like over Washington, not many clouds. That doesn't happen that often. And that's what we've been seeing. If you step outside, it's like, it's kind of clear. You might even see stars in some places. From there, I might want to get like an actual weather forecast out of this. So I'm going to just change this. It's good to know here what is forecast and what is essentially observations. And satellite and radar, those two things are observations. Those are instruments that have used some kind of technology to pick up what's going on out there, whether it's clouds or precip. Yeah. And so those things are essentially observations. Everything else on here, more or less, with some exceptions, are forecasts. So it's like fiction. It's what's going to happen in the future. May or may not happen. So this one, clouds, which is a little deceiving. It kind of looks like the radar. I like it that way, but this is actually what's going to happen in the future. And so you can zoom in here, and just like on our forecast map, you can pick a town. We can also, Snoqualmie Pass is kind of nice because it is a town that is in the mountains, but we can also zoom in and say I want to go to Snow Lake Divide. I can click a point there, and then I need to click this little arrow for forecast at this location. And this is kind of similar to the hourly output for the NOAA forecast that I showed you, but it gives you some more graphics and it's more integrated. Now, normally, if you click on that, it's going to look like this. I like clicking on this meteogram. It's also worth knowing that Windy was developed by the name, was developed for wind, like for people who are kite surfers or paragliders or pilots. But it's developed into, yeah, it's an amazing resource. So I like clicking on this meteogram, and what you see here is it's not single hourly periods. And by the way, this is the free version. You can pay and get more details. But they're like 3-hour blocks, which is pretty good. And you see kind of an icon for like, oh, it's going to be cloudy. Oh, now it's going to snow. Now it's going to start to be snowing, but clearing a little bit. Over here on Saturday, we see little bits of sun popping up. So that's pretty intuitive. It'll give you temperatures. These are wind speeds and directions, including the little numbers underneath are gusts, which I find that super helpful because these are 3-hour averages, big numbers, and then the little ones show the peak gusts. So the highest wind speed during that 3-hour period. And then here is like a really cool cross section. This is like an atmospheric cross section showing you essentially what the clouds are going to be like. Again, over 3-hour blocks as you march forward. These little bars down here are amounts of precip, in this case, all snow, which is a good thing. Doesn't look like Snow Lake Divide's going to get any rain. That's cool. So yeah, anyways, there's a lot you can do here. I will have to say, so like all these things down here are different models. Lyra alluded to different models are good for different things. The ECMWF, you can just call that the European model. That one's awesome. Highly recommended. This is one of the few places you can get this for free. If you want a higher resolution, so that this is like really good for like 12 to 24 hours, really good for the mountains, the HRRR or even HRDPS. These are Canadian-based models, and they're super good for kind of high, that H is high resolution. So yeah, I'd recommend those. They're all models are good for different things. So if you do like getting to this level, you can kind of combo. So you can go to the NOAA forecast discussion, and if they're saying like we're favoring the European model, or we're favoring the GFS, or we're favoring the HER, you can then look at those models and see what they're showing you.
A couple questions. One for here, Josh, where to find? These are not from the NWAC site. These are separate.
Right. So I would recommend, there's lots of places you can find weather models. The most accessible is windy.com, I would say. There's a lot of other things out there, but if you want to start diving into this level, and again, this is like, I would say, I'm not going to say this is less accurate. This is less filtered than what you read on the NWAC Mountain Weather, as well as the NOAA point forecast. So it's less filtered. There's a greater chance this could be wrong, but yeah, it's just different. You have to take it more with a grain of salt. This is a robot, a computer. But yeah, go to windy.com and start playing around and see what you think.
And windy.com has an app, and it's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Not as powerful, again, like CalTopo, but really good.
I have no affiliation with Windy. I'm not getting paid by them, right?
The other thing, actually, Josh, that I love about Windy is the relevant webcams. Can you click on the little bubble above the X down and left?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I don't use this as much as you might, but yeah, webcams are awesome, and I can show you on the NWAC site as well. But so we clicked a point. In this case, we clicked a point for Snoqualmie Pass or near Snoqualmie Pass in the mountains, and these are all webcams that are near there. In this case, these are all Department of Transportation webcams, but yeah, super helpful. And you can click around on them. So it's like, oh, roads look pretty good. Nice driving there. Not too bad. But this is like your trip plan before you get on skis. How you get there. And yeah, some of these have video loops. I'll show you, not to jump around too much, but just real quick, another place you can see webcams and also weather stations. You can go to, at NWAC, the weather station map. Yeah, webcams are really awesome. There's a lot of them out there. So in that same place, we don't have all of those webcams, but we do have some of those. There you go. Oh, whoops, sorry. This is Stevens Pass. It's my go-to. That's my home place. Over here at Snoqualmie, let's check out another one. This one, oh, not available. There you go. There's Franklin Falls on the DOT. It's worth noting, like, some of our NWAC sites, or sorry, webcams that we have listed here. We don't necessarily own and operate all of these, but these are all public. And just a couple. Oh, here's an interesting one. This might be dark because it's dark now. There you go.
Ooh.
So this is a webcam that we link to. Again, it's right here. And sometimes you have to pull it up on a different site. Sorry, different tab. But yeah, I don't think this one's on Windy. So lots of different places for webcams. There's a wealth of information out there. You can spend the whole day at your computer and never go see news if you're not careful.
It's true. It's good. Like you said, Josh, you kind of have your own flow. It's with practice. You can get into like, like just establish a system for what you think gives you the best information in the efficient amount of time. And then you can go down rabbit holes when you have time. But yeah, it is. There's a lot of weather geekery in Washington because there's a lot of weather. So lots of
Yeah,
resources.
definitely. This is a great place to be baffled by the weather and try to learn about it too, because it's very dynamic and interesting weather here.
Super interesting.
That's
But
really
yeah,
all I have on my end. And I know we're kind of getting down there in time. Yeah.
there's one question. Do you know if it's possible to register for just one of the laying tracks sessions, or do you have to register for all of them?
I don't know. And you could email info@nwac.us. That would be a good, and if there, let's see, if I didn't show, oh, I did show it here. I don't know if there's a more specific contact. I don't think so, but info@nwac.us. That would be the best place to ask that question. I'm not involved with like the admin of the laying tracks, but yeah, we do give a discount for members. It is pay. There are also lots of free avalanche awareness courses around, put on by all sorts of people, including like we NWAC have some. There's all sorts of other resources through Alpine. Forgive me for not being as up on. Lyra can promote all the Alpine events. She's way more up on it.
This one too, you will, if you register for all of them, you will get the recording. So that can be a plus.
Yep,
there,
definitely.
even if you
And
can't
some
be
of them are very worth. I'll say mine, like there's a bunch of activities and it's pretty interactive. Others are less interactive. So yeah, if you want to know which ones you really need to attend versus like watch the video, you could ask that also at info.
That's awesome. I've got a couple last slides. If
Yeah,
Josh,
yeah. Here, I'll stop
one
sharing.
last. Oh, it allows me to steal the screen share. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, you could have just cut me off if you needed to.
Okay, did it work? Everyone see my 3 colored? Yeah. So just a few notes for us to wrap up here on your next steps in formal education, next steps in getting out, and some thoughts for mentorship. We are always, I'll put certainly take a list. There's lots of uphill policies at ski areas, which is an awesome way to just go through the motions without being exposed to avalanche hazard because you're inbounds, so long as it's operational and within their policy. If it's outside of operational hours, it might just be wild. So, if the resort hasn't opened yet, that's maybe not relevant now, but people have gotten caught in the ski areas or adjacent in interesting parts of the season where areas weren't open. So FYI there. But in general, if you're touring inbounds as people are skiing around, that can be another great angle of the sport. And ski areas are increasingly supporting that, which is smart. A few simple backcountry tours there. Those are tours that are pretty busy, but also you can minimize your exposure to avalanche terrain tremendously. And I'll put a plug for all of us. I know I'm always really excited to work with folks who put together a group of their own touring friends, and then that helps to lower the cost of a custom program and just come out and like you can define the objective of the day and I can steer part of it or do like a review level 1, level 2 kind of a day with your friend group and your touring partners. So that's always a really fun one. And especially being in Washington, we can be a little more responsive based on guide availability with weather and conditions as well. So keep us on your speed dial. Speed dialing is not really a thing anymore, but you know what I mean. think that's all I got.
Wow, that was awesome. That was like a master class. I was like seriously taking notes.
Awesome.
Wow. Wait, someone's writing in the chat. Oh, thank you. Lyra, Josh, thank you so much. This was such an informative webinar, from the gear to next steps, like all the weather and forecasting was so great. We did record it. It's recording right now. So if you didn't catch something, it'll be up on the Alpine Ascents blog in probably like a couple days for you to rewatch or share with your friends. What other things? We're doing a little promotion at Alpine Ascents right now. So if you sign up for an AIRE level 1 course and an intro to backcountry ski course in the same season, we'll take $200 off. So a pretty good deal there. Yeah, but I don't know, just thank you both so much. Before we let everyone go eat dinner, I have a question for Lyra and Josh. If you could go back in time and tell your younger self, maybe like 10 years ago self, one piece of advice for backcountry skiing success, what would you tell them? Or maybe 50 years ago when you're like really fresh onto the scene.
Oh, Mary, you didn't tell us to think about this one. That's a good one. Oh, what's my off the cuff? Do you have an off the cuff response, Josh? Oh my gosh.
I think I got one.
You
So,
got one?
you know, mentors, and that could be friends, it could be people who are more experienced, could be like kind of official type mentors. But sometimes it's hard to recognize in the moment. But when you can recognize you have like a good mentor type relationship, like grab onto that, like take advantage of it as much as you can, because those are the people that really, I felt like really advanced my backcountry skiing, my understanding of snow and weather, my ability to like be in the mountains effectively. Like that was huge. So really, you know, when you find that, hold on to it and take advantage of it as much as you can, and maybe even like be explicit with it. Like ask that person, like, hey, you seem like a great mentor. I really like getting out with you. Like, can we get out more and do more of this? So that'd be my advice.
Wow, that's great advice.
That's a really good one. Yeah, and I think I would probably parallel that one with just the relationships. Like to me, that's really what backcountry skiing has ended up being all about. Like at first, I think I thought it was all about the skiing, and then as time went on, I realized that really it's such a complex layer of athletics and outdoors and navigation and conditions and weather and snow. And it gets to be a lot. And at the end of the day, the best days that I ever had were those where I had really great nurturing mentorship situations or nurturing peer groups. And that's the sustainability. That's the fun. That's what keeps you safest and keeps you learning. And then it becomes more of a lifelong thing. So yeah, good question.
That's great advice. I know when I have had the pleasure to ski with Lyra, I always learn way, way, way more than I can even remember afterwards.
Just have to go again.
Yes, yes, please. I will message you later. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Like I said, we will record this. It is recording. We'll put it on the Alpine Ascents blog in a couple of days. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Lyra, thank you so much. Josh, thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night and a great rest of your pre and post and during holiday season. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
And we are ending. Farewell.